this is just going to be a refresher on solving equations, and then we're going to talk about solving two-step equations. And I believe you guys have gone through this before, but just in case you haven't, I'm going to go through and explain how to do each step, just to be sure that we know what's going on here. So solving equations is something you're going to be doing a lot of for the rest of your middle and high school career. So it's very important that we, get a basic understanding of it now, so that when we move forward and you're in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, college algebra, even geometry, that you know how to solve these equations. So the first thing you need to remember is that we're trying to get x or y or a, b, c, whatever our variable is, we're trying to get it by itself because we are solving for that variable. So in other words, I want everything besides x to be on the other side of the equation, so it reads x equals this. Or in some cases, you might be moving things to this side where it would read blank equals x. Alright, so first things first, I'm trying to get x by itself, or I'm trying to solve for x. So I have a -3 attached to the x here. So since this is subtraction, I need to do the opposite to get it to go move to the other side, right? So since this is -3 here, I'm just going to add 3 to both sides. And another important thing to remember is that when you're solving equations, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side of the equal sign. Alright, so x equals, because -3 plus 3 is 0, right? So I can just cross those out. So on this side I'm left with x equals 5 plus 3 is 8. Alright, so let's look at number 2 here. We have 5x equals 15. Alright, so x has a 5 attached to it here. Now it's not attached by addition or subtraction. How is the 5 connected to the x? It's being multiplied, right? 5x is just 5 times x, right? So since this is being multiplied, how do I undo multiplication? The opposite of multiplication is division, so I'm going to need to divide. Now remember, I want to get x by itself, so x is going to stay on this side, so I'm trying to get rid of this 5. So I'm going to divide by 5 there. And whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do on the other side. Alright, so if I went through and looked at it, 5 divided by 5 is what? It's just 1, right? So I could write 1x here or just x, but I'm going to cross those out just because I know it's not going to affect that here. So x, or if you wanted to write 5 divided by 5 is 1, so you could write 1x, or you could just write x. So I'm just going to write x here. So x equals, and then what is 15 divided by 5? Well, that's just 3. Alright, so they were being multiplied, so in order to get the x by itself, I did the opposite of that, so I divided. Alright, now number 3 here. I have x over 2 equals 4. Alright, so my x here looks, it's almost by itself, but it's got this 2 hanging out here with it. So what is being done here? How can I move this 2 to the other side, or get rid of this 2 so x is by itself? Well, this is a division problem here, right? X is being divided by 2. Alright, so since it's being divided by 2, what is the opposite of division? Well, we just did this example, and we knew the opposite of multiplication was division. So the opposite of division would be multiplication. So I need to multiply by 2 here. And whenever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side as well. Alright, so 2 times x over 2. These 2 will cancel. That's just going to give me 1. So x equals 8. Alright, now that we've done a little review of solving one-step equations, let's move on to solving some two-step equations. Now these are not They shouldn't be too difficult. Hopefully you've seen them before. But we're just having to do an extra step to get x by itself. All right, so I wrote out the steps for us. First, we need to get rid of anything attached to the x by addition or subtraction. Then we're going to undo the multiplication or division to get x by itself to solve for x. All right, so if my first step is to get rid of anything attached by addition or subtraction, well, I want to get x by itself here, right? I want to get x all by itself. So I've got to get rid of all these other numbers over here. So first, let's go ahead and get rid of this one. Anything attached by addition or subtraction. So I'm going to add 12 to both sides because that's the opposite of subtraction is addition. And I know that negative 12 plus 12 is going to be 0. So I'm left with 5x on this side. 8 plus 12 is 20. All right, now I'm one step closer to x being by itself. So the next thing I need to do is figure out how are these two connected. Well, 5 and x are connected by multiplication, right? Because 5 times x gives me 5x. So what is the opposite of multiplication? Or how can I undo this multiplication? Well, I'm going to use division, the opposite. All right, so 5 divided by 5 is just 1. So that's going to leave me with x equals 20 divided by 5 is 4. Okay, now here's the deal. This is not going to be required at this point, but in the future, if you're doing an equation problem and you're not sure if you got the right answer, you don't feel right about it, you can always plug your x value back in, which I know you guys know how to do, and check your answer. So wherever I see an x, I would just plug in whatever it tells me that x equals. So in this case, it would be 5. I have x here, so 5 times my x is 4 minus 12 equals 8. All right, and then I would just work it out and see if it is accurate. So 5 times 4 is 20. Right? And 20 minus 12 equals 8. So that is correct. So we did this problem correctly. All right. So first I got rid of anything connected by addition or subtraction, anything kind of just hanging on by addition or subtraction. Then whatever's connected to it very closely by multiplication or addition, I'm going to undo that. All right. So let's try number 2. All right, so I want to get b by itself over here. So what is the problem with this side? What can I do to get b by itself? Well, this is connected here by an addition or subtraction sign. But don't let that minus sign fool you, right? Because here, we're going to try to move this 7 over here, right? But this is not a negative 7. It's actually a positive 7. Even though there was no sign in front of it, if there's no negative sign, we're always going to assume that it's positive, okay? So since this is a plus 7 here, how can I get rid of the 7 here or move it to the other side? I have to do the opposite. So what's the opposite of a positive or addition? That's going to be subtraction, right? And whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. All right, so 7 minus 7 gives me 0. So I'm left with negative b, so don't forget that sign there. Negative b equals 2 minus 7 is negative 5. Now, I'm very close to being finished with this problem. I'm left with negative b equals negative 5. But I want to know what b equals. So I need to figure out how can I get rid of this negative. Well, if I don't have a number in front of a variable, do you know what my coefficient is, the number in front? If you don't have a number or a coefficient in front of your variable, it's always just that understood 1 right there. Do you remember us talking about the understood one? Right, so it was negative b. It's also technically like negative 1b, because 1 times b and b, they're the same exact thing, correct? So since this is negative 1b, how are these two connected? Well, negative 1 times b is negative 1b, right? How do I undo multiplication? I divide it. All right? So I undid the multiplication by division. So negative 1 divided by negative 1, that's positive 1, right? So 1b or just b, right? I could write 1b or just b. They're the same thing. Equals negative 5 divided by negative 1. A negative divided by a negative is just going to give me a positive. All right, I'm not going to check this one. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next problem. But if you wanted to check, you would just plug in 5 where you see this b here. Well, I'll go ahead and check it. So 7 minus b equals 5 equals 2. Is that correct? Yes, it is, because 7 minus 5 equals 2. All right, let's look at this last problem here. So kind of the same as the last one. I need to get rid of anything connected to a, to my variable, anything attached by addition or subtraction. So this number here, I want to move it over here, right? So a is more by itself. So this is being added. What's the opposite of addition? Subtraction, right? So positive 6 minus 6 is just going to give me 0, so I can just cancel those. So I'm left with negative a, don't forget that negative sign there, equals 2. All right. Now, remember before when I had a negative b in this problem, it's my responsibility to understand that if I don't have a coefficient here, it's just an understood 1. I should know in my head that there's like a 1 there, but I just can't see it. So how do I get rid of this negative 1 here on this side to get a by itself? Well, they're being multiplied, right? They're attached by multiplication. I'm going to divide them. So negative a, negative 1a, divided by negative 1. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. All right, so negative 1 divided by negative 1 is going to give me positive 1, so that will just cancel. So I'm left with a, or 1a, equals 2 divided by negative 1. It's going to give me negative 2. All right, now if I wanted to check this problem, here's the tricky part. All right, so negative, right? It's negative a. If a is negative 2, my problem would look like that. So negative 2 plus 6 equals 8. Now remember, I said if there's not a coefficient here, we can always just assume that there's a 1. If it doesn't give you 1, there's just a 1 there. All right? So negative 1 times negative 2 gives me positive 2. And 2 plus 6 equals 8. So this problem we did correctly. All right, so let's take a look at our steps real quick again. So first we get rid of anything attached to the variable here by addition or subtraction, whether it's on the right or the left side, doesn't matter. Like here we moved it to the other side even though it was to the left of the variable. So anything attached by addition or subtraction, we do the opposite to get rid of it. Next, we undo our multiplication or division to solve for x. So your main goal here is to get x by itself. That's one thing that we need to just keep in mind. All right, I hope this video helps. I have a few more examples that I will show you and we can move on.